This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hi everyone, and welcome to Evangelical, a show exploring the world inside and outside the evangelical subculture. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. My guests this week are Lauren O'Neill and Nico Bakulich from the podcast Sunday School Dropouts. On their show, they're reading through every book of the Bible for the first time, but it is decidedly not your average Bible study podcast. To use a bit of Christianese, we talk about their journeys, as well as what led them to start a podcast about the Bible to begin with. We also come up with some solid band names along the way. As always, you can help the show by rating and reviewing the show on iTunes. You can follow the show across the internet. We're on Twitter and Instagram at XEvangelicalPod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/XEvangelicalPod. You can also find me on Twitter at BRChastain. You can also support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/XEvangelicalPod. All right, let's get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Evangelical. I have with me this week Lauren O'Neill and Nico Bakulich from the wonderful podcast Sunday School Dropouts. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
I'm really glad that you could join me to talk. I'm a huge fan of your show, of Sunday School Dropouts. I look forward to it every single week.
Thank you so much.
When I discovered it, I definitely went on one of those podcast binges and just listened to the entire backstory, the entire back catalog, rather.
That's a lot of Bible. You got to be careful.
Yeah, that's very true.
That's
In
right.
Concentrated doses, it's painfully boring.
Yeah, there are some really long, boring stretches in there, and you triumphed through.
But the show is great.
Yeah, but the show is great and amazing, and never boring
Don't worry
in
about
any
that.
way.
Mm.
That's right. So, let's learn a little bit about both of you. Let's start with you, Lauren. Where did you grow up?
Well, we both grew up in a suburb of Berkeley, California.
Oh, okay.
And it's called Lafayette. And it's a like very wealthy suburb, but also very liberal, like you'd expect near Berkeley.
Okay, and in that area, so I have limited exposure to the Bay Area. For a while, my sister lived there on a couple of different occasions. Once lived in the San Francisco, and then another time in Oakland. So I've visited Berkeley, but can you describe what the overall sort of climate is outside of it being very liberal? I remember one time when I visited, I was in a very deep evangelical phase. So like I had like eagle eyes trying to see if there were a lot of churches around, and I remember there weren't that many churches compared to like the Midwest.
Right. There's definitely some churches, not that many, and a lot of them tend to be liberal.
You see, that's interesting that you say that, because from my perspective, there's like a street,
shit ton of churches.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's like a street in town that's like nothing but churches.
Yeah, but that's like there's like multiple of those in other places.
Yeah. It's definitely like so I've lived in small town Indiana and suburban and city of Chicago primarily, and there's just churches everywhere you look. So that was the one thing I just kind of stuck out in comparison to the Midwest, which I don't know.
Yeah, so like I was raised Presbyterian, and the church that I went to, if you compare it to like elsewhere, like the rest of American Christianity, like my church was probably pretty liberal. But compared to like the surrounding culture of the East Bay, extremely conservative.
So I know Presbyterians. There's like the Missouri Synod, and then there's PCUSA. And I think the
Yeah.
Missouri
So
Synod is like like very evangelical type of conservative. And
yeah. So
then
I was PCUSA.
okay.
Although I did not know that at the time.
That really sounds like somebody insulting you on Twitter. Welcome to PC USA.
Political correctness gone mad.
Yeah.
Um,
Special snowflake. Yeah.
So, but I actually just was looking up my old church in preparation for this podcast, and I discovered that they are no longer PCUSA. As of earlier this year, they've changed to some weird, like, new evangelical denomination called ECO. ECO. Okay, it's called.
Rebranding.
It's seriously, it's like the most rebranding thing. It's like not even churchy. It's so rebranding. It's ECO : an evangelical covenant order.
Whoa.
But when you say
Are they witches now?
when you say it, you're supposed to include the eco and like that's part of the name. It's not like the acronym itself is part of its own name.
Oh.
It's like recursive infinity forever.
Recursive.
And I guess that was created because PCUSA decided to like accept gay people. So
Always
my
problematic.
church, so my church that I grew up in was like, we're not going to do that. So that gives you sort of an idea of the environment I grew up in. When you think about the Bay Area, like it's a gay mecca, right? Like that's a huge part of the culture here is gay rights and has been for a long time. And then I was going to a church that eventually would decide to like become a new denomination because it didn't accept gay people. So that was like a big point of tension for me.
Yeah. On that note, one of the craziest stories I've heard of a denomination changing is I have family in southern Indiana, which is also known as Kentuckiana, and it's a very small town. And so there was these people that my grandparents knew that attended a church that it wasn't part of any sort of larger denomination, but they at one point split over like I don't know, some people liked one pastor, some people liked another, so they became two different churches. And then they couldn't decide what to do with the church piano. And then one group took the piano from the other group and then put a lock on their sanctuary so they couldn't get in and take it back. God. And then the old church just decided to become a no music church. Because they didn't have piano
amazing.
Anymore. It's been like that for like 60 years.
It very closely mirrors that episode of The Simpsons where they have the fight over the lemon tree with Shelbyville.
Yes.
So look that up. Classic.
So Nico, how about you? In your show, which I encourage everyone to check out, Lauren, you introduce yourself as the ex-Christian, and Nico, you are the non-believing sort of Jew. So, were you not really affected by the sort of environment that Lauren was in, even though you're in the same town?
Oh yeah, I mean, like the town that we grew up in was very secular, I'd say, in most regards. So I was exposed to much more Judaism growing up than I was Christianity in private and public life, I'd say. So no, I was not affected by her Presbyterian church or whatever struggles they were going through.
Yeah.
I mean, there were not that many. Like at our high school, I was one of, I don't know, like 10 Christian students. But Nico, you weren't like raised Jewish.
No. It's like some cultural aspect of it, I suppose, and some very minor religious aspects of it. Like my mom teaching me a couple prayers that are like the Michigan version of Hebrew, like sort of half remembered. I can spout out a couple of them now, and then Lauren looks at me and she's just like, "Yeah, technically, I guess that's Hebrew." But...
I studied Hebrew in college for no real reason.
But no strong religious stuff in the family or in the environment. Although, my mom considers herself raised Jewish, and
she was raised hella Jewish.
She was raised extremely Jewish, yeah.
The hella Jewish.
Yeah, the hella denomination. But then, so she. This is like a great story about her. Is that when she was young, she wanted to be a rabbi.
Yeah, because that's just who the kind of person that she is that if she's going to do something, she's going to do it all the way, and she's going to be the best at it that she ever could.
And then they told her women can't be rabbis, and she was like, "Well, I'm an atheist now. Fuck this."
Yeah, I'm out. That's it.
Well, there you go.
And then I think the first female rabbi was confirmed like maybe a couple years after that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
But she was already gone. She had already flipped the table.
Or it may have been even earlier in progressive Judaism. She was raised conservative, though.
The only thing I have in mind is the Barbra Streisand movie. I'm sorry, that's like what stuck
That's
in my
your
head.
exposure to Judaism?
No, the female rabbi thing.
That's true.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of that movie.
Yentl.
Thank you.
Duh.
So Lauren, what was your church like as far as like the youth group culture and that sort of thing growing up? You've mentioned on your show that you were involved and you did a lot of the you helped as a Sunday school teacher and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Was there also that sort of strong youth group culture that was present in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s?
Yes. And I was in the worship band.
Hey, all right.
Yeah.
I was too.
I was the lead singer in the worship band. And so every week I would go, there was 2 services. So I'd go to the first service, I would teach Sunday school to children. And then the second service, I would go to youth group and sing in the worship band. And it was very much that sort of like, we're cool. It's like rock and roll over here, we're in the 21st century.
Leave your organs at home. We got
electric guitars. But yeah, that's what it was like. And again, pretty liberal in terms of American Christianity, but very conservative compared to the rest of the culture that I was living in.
So then, did you have things like Third Day and Sonic Flood in the rotation and everything?
Yes, definitely Sonic Flood, Jars of Clay, like all the. No.
We're still here. The Post Boys. What's the name of that band? No, I'm way out of my depth. Sorry, I tried to get my toe in. It was too cold for me. Newsboys.
Yeah. DC Talk was a big one. Yeah. So
what does DC Talk stand for? DC.
Actually, I don't know. Are they just from Washington D.C.? I don't know.
Yeah,
Direct
I don't know either.
Direct to Christ line. Yeah. So that was.
Did you have like a Wednesday youth group sort of sometime during the week sort of youth group that you would attend?
We did not, although I would be there I forget if it was Wednesday or Thursday, but I would be there once a week to do practice for the worship band.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
But there was not another youth group service, as far as I know. I mean, there were like...
You're looking at me for confirmation like I was
like
there.
You have any idea. No, like there were some Bible studies that you could go to midweek, but I don't think any of them were youth focused. Oh,
okay. What about sorry. What about any other trappings of like sort of Christianese, sort of either were you exposed to the sorts of like purity culture sorts of BS? Did some I'm really letting my my own attitude sort of shine through there.
We forgive. It's okay.
Yes, but a toned down version. So like my church was kind of like, okay, well, we believe that like gay people are bad and we believe that like premarital sex is wrong, but we're not really going to talk about that. We're just going to focus on the positive stuff. So like we never talked about hell, but we talked a lot about heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's the soft sell.
yeah, exactly. So in terms of like purity culture, we definitely in the youth group had, like a couple weeks each year would be devoted to talking about like sex and how masturbation is a sin. And we would separate into like a boys group and a girls group. And then the girls group had to learn about how like we couldn't dress slutty because it would tempt our brothers in Christ and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what the boys learned. I guess like that girls were sinful or something. And then we would get, I remember, excuse me, I remember on Valentine's Day, we would have like little Valentines that were like, I love Jesus and not my boyfriend. Only Jesus.
That's pretty hardcore, if you ask me.
I mean, it wasn't. It was not hardcore though, because it was like we usually didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
Usually we
yeah.
were talking about, like how we were all sinful and deserved to die or whatever, not about sex. Sex was only brought up like once a year.
Yeah. Your experience sounds somewhat similar to mine. I went to United Methodist churches growing up, and that's also like a fairly liberal, overall, it's a fairly liberal denomination. But in retrospect, it seems like there was a lot of the sorts of cultural things that are very common with even more conservative denominations and expressions of Christianity that sort of like, I don't know, like infiltrated in a way, like worked their way into the more mainstream denominations. It's probably due to a number of factors like Christian bookstores and that sort of stuff. Like, they sort of disseminate more conservative ideas as opposed to, you're not going to find like liberation theology things in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
so like
wait. What's liberation theology?
It's a theology that's popular, and I'm by no means really I don't really know that much about it, but it's popular amongst in South America, where a lot of theologians in South America found narratives within Christianity that speak directly to oppressed people and empower them through through Christianity, essentially, to feel in a lot of ways much more assured. And it's very empowering to oppressed groups. And it's a much more progressive 20th century, 21st century sort of strain of thinking, and not something you'd find in an evangelical or conservative church.
I see.
Yeah. So I've learned, I did not know this when I was actually a Christian, but I've learned since that like Presbyterians are supposed to have a focus on social justice.
Okay.
But the stereotype of Presbyterians, well, there's two stereotypes of Presbyterians. One is that they're rich, and the other is that they're like not demonstrative. They're just kind of like cold and unfriendly. And the second one is, I don't know, I guess fine. not super true, but not super false either. But like the stereotype of Presbyterians being rich, I think was very true of my church. We lived in a wealthy suburb. Most of the people there were very well off. And like, I remember that there would be like controversies about like how the church was like investing their funds in like mutual funds or whatever.
Sure.
So I like really had no idea that Presbyterianism was supposed to focus on social justice, because I was definitely exposed to a version that was very focused on wealth. Not very focused. That's not fair to say, because if you look at like some of these televangelists or like Joel Osteen or whatever, it's not even comparable to that. But like, there's that Bible verse about how it's easier for a camel to get through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into heaven. And like, I was taught in church, the eye of the needle was actually like a rock formation that was present near Jerusalem. So it was like difficult for a camel to get there, but like it was fine. It's just like like a camel could get through it and it'd be fine. It was just like kind of a tight squeeze. When
That's an interesting. Usually, it's the metaphor is made literal. But
right,
kind of
and
I
mean, I think it's supposed to be literal. I think it's supposed to be literal. And if you read, like, I mean, so our podcast is about the Bible, so I've been reading through the Bible, and also if you read like what Jesus taught, it's very much about like being rich is never portrayed as a good thing. But my church would be like, yeah, it's fine. We can manage it.
Yeah.
I just want to take it back one step and point out that Christian Bookstores is a pretty decent band name. And Liberation Theology is not a bad first album title.
If
anybody out there is looking, Christian Bookstores, I think that's not bad.
That's not too shabby.
Yeah. Clearly never been inside a Christian bookstore. Oh no, wait, we went to one in Spain. We were just in Spain and we went into a Christian bookstore and it was amazing. It was very Catholic though, which is not the type of Christian bookstore that I'm used to. But there was one book that we saw that was like Mi psicoholista se llama Jesus. Mm-hmm. Like, my therapist is named Jesus.
Yeah.
That is great. And I've worked in my share of Christian bookstores, and
oh, nice.
And that was my high school job for a while.
Oh wow!
We didn't have any cool book titles like that.
I
know. That one was like pretty great, even for a Christian bookstore.
This one also had Jesus the manga.
Jesus manga.
Yeah,
okay.
I bought manga in Spanish, but we didn't.
Oh, I do remember one item that was on sale for a while was the Action Bible, which was a comic book version of the Bible. It might be good for your podcast, actually.
Yeah, maybe we should look into that.
There are lots of crazy versions of the New Testament, so it just turns out that the Bible is apparently 85% Old Testament.
Yeah, there's a lot of Old Testament.
Yep.
So when did you start to become more critical of the faith that you were brought up in, Lauren? When did that sort of begin to take a turn?
Well, in high school, my best friend was gay. And she identifies as bi now, but at the time she identified as gay. And so that sort of got me thinking like, I can't really, this is a part of Christianity that I cannot really like agree with, because my best friend is gay and it's very clear that it's fine and it's not a sin. And, that's just ridiculous. So that sort of started me on a path of being like, well, I can't accept this part of Christianity, but like I still believe in Jesus. And then I was like, I can't believe in like this whole no premarital sex thing. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's, like when I started dating, I was like, well, this is so clearly fine. It's not a sin, And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to reject that part, but I still believe in Jesus. And then when I went to college, I just kind of, when I didn't have like a structure where I was going to church every Sunday, because I'd been doing that my whole life at the same church and teaching Sunday school and singing in the worship band and everything. And the structure was all set up. So I was not going to just deviate from it. But when I went to college and all of a sudden I wasn't going to church every Sunday, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't have to do this. I mean, there were other things too. Like I definitely was getting tired of like, I'm not supposed to believe in evolution. Growing up in Berkeley, it's like, if you don't believe in evolution, you're a freak.
That you felt that pressure. You felt that pressure to be like a young Earth creationist or something like that.
Not a young Earth creationist, but just to not believe in evolution.
Okay,
that was like.
But you're also expected to do well on the biology AP exam. So it's like, what the fuck are you supposed to do?
Yes.
As a young Lauren.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was. I also had a lot of pressure to do well academically, and I did. I graduated valedictorian. I got like a 4.5 GPA. But in doing that, you have to like study science. And I also like ended up majoring in English, majoring in creative writing, and then getting an MFA in creative writing. And so when you read a lot of literature, it's all about like moral ambiguity and like moral relativism. And you're like, this does not really square with the things I'm being taught in church. Although what I've discovered from doing our podcast is that it does actually square with a lot of the Bible.
Some of the smart parts of the Bible.
But not with like cultural Christianity.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction too. That a lot of what has become the sort of cultural Christianity is just a lot of cruft over. There's a lot of great stuff that's kind of hidden underneath all of that.
Yeah. I mean, my theory is that like most religion is like 90% culture and only 10% belief.
Yeah, that's fairly, there's something to that. Because a lot of it is just a ritual that or sometimes even just habit. Because a ritual a lot of times implies a sense of intention. But a habit is something you just do somewhat unconsciously.
Right.
So for you, Nico, did you ever really have any of these sorts of similar moral quandaries or anything like that through your adolescence or through college or anything like that?
No. I did not.
What is that like?
I
know, it's amazing, right?
I mean, it was fine. I still had stuff to worry about. I mean, it's not like that removes all of your problems, but that was certainly something I did not worry about.
Also, Nico is like the most well-adjusted person that exists and has like no psychological problems.
That's not true. That's not true.
It seems true to me in comparison.
I understand. But don't big up me too much, Miss valedictorian. No, I maybe a tiny bit you're just thinking like, some people have religion. Like, what if I had that in my life? Like, well, I don't really know enough about it and I got stuff going on, so I wasn't stressing about it.
I got stuff going on.
Like, I didn't have, there was no pressure in pretty much any part of my life to get involved with religion.
Can I ask, okay, so we went to the same high school, and there were not very many Christian kids.
Right.
How did you perceive us?
It didn't really register for me. Like thinking of people as like, oh, like she's super Christian was not like a thing.
What about Margaret?
Well, I mean, I still in those cases, like that wasn't the first thing that came to mind. And later looking back on it, it's very easy to be like, wow, she was like super Christian. And even at the time I was like, wow, she's pretty religious, I guess that's a thing, but I didn't really have enough exposure to jump to conclusions. Like I didn't really have the conclusions to jump to.
I see.
And so it didn't really enter my thinking a lot. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know if you're asking me or Lauren in that situation.
I'll ask everybody. Listener.
So in retrospect, I mean, in what you've learned from Lauren through then, is it just kind of shocking the sort of things you've learned as far as what was sort of common either belief or sort of practice that you learned about in retrospect?
I mean, it's mildly shocking.
I mean, he's pretty used to it now. Like we've been dating for 9 years, so.
Yeah, I'd say mildly shocking.
Mildly.
But
yeah.
I mean, I wasn't there. I wasn't in the trenches going to church every Sunday, so it's difficult for me to really understand how that shapes a childhood or how those kind of pressures can be like omnipresent in your life. But I approach it with empathy and sympathy. But I'm not, it's life,
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
And everybody has the things that they need to kind of address.
Not me. I'm doing great.
You're doing great. You're just doing your thing.
This man is psychologically sound.
That's enviable.
It It really is. Like, you don't even know.
So Lauren, you've mentioned before, and I don't know, Nico, whether I've heard you just through your episodes. I don't know if I've heard you, Nico, identify as an atheist or not. But was there anything that sort of led you, Lauren, to that? And Nico, are you somewhere on that sort of spectrum as well?
I'll answer first. I'm absolutely an atheist. The only reason I don't that wasn't in the intro to our show, and I tried very consciously to keep it out of it, is because in my opinion, some of the discourse around atheism online
#the discourse
is a little overheated in my opinion. Mm-hmm. It's very confrontational, and I don't think it's productive.
You're talking about your Dawkinses, your Hitchenses.
Yeah, I don't think it's interesting or productive. And even though in private, I know this isn't in private, but as a personal thing, I will happily identify as an atheist. On the show, I just wanted to be I don't want this to be in the atheism section of the internet, you know?
Just this is not like Richard Dawkins.
Yeah. I'm not here to confront people and be why are you such an idiot for believing in God?
Right.
I don't think that is a good use of anybody's time or energy. But in terms of what I personally believe, yeah, I mean, by any definition, I'm an atheist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For me, so I kind of gradually stopped identifying as a Christian over the course of the 4 years of college. But ironically, one of the things that made me take longer to identify as an atheist was when I started to date Nico. Because so we went to high school together, and I had a huge crush on him, and I was totally in love with him, but he barely knew that I existed. And then when we started dating in college, I was like, well, clearly there's someone up there doing something for me. So then I sort of identified gradually as well, maybe I'm not a Christian, but
spiritual.
I still sort of, I still sort of believe in God. And then I was like, maybe I'm agnostic. And then eventually I was like, I'm an atheist. I don't believe there is anything supernatural. I could be wrong, but that's not what I believe.
Also, in my mind, going out and saying that you're an atheist is also hey, religion is not for me. I personally don't get anything from religion.
Yeah, and to me that's important for me to state.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this when we were, starting our podcast and coming up with a little intro line which calls Nico a non-believing sort of Jew instead of an atheist sort of Jew.
A raving atheist. Yeah.
And for me, it does feel important for me to say I'm an atheist, because to me it means I've rejected all this toxic stuff that I learned that I don't want to be a part of anymore, and I'm doing that very consciously. But I, at the same time, don't want to be one of these new atheists. I don't like Richard Dawkins. And when I first decided to accept that label, and I started reading Richard Dawkins and various internet forums,
sure,
I was like, yes, my people. And then very quickly I discovered, no, these are not my people. I actually don't have a people. It's just, I just don't believe in God. And that's it.
Don't want to be involved in organized religion.
Yeah. And I don't want to go anywhere on Sunday. I just want to sleep in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I recently edited, I'm a freelance writer and editor, and I recently edited a book about world religions. And I was going through it and I was like, okay, I need one where you don't have to go to church and you don't have to believe in God. And then I was like, oh wait, that's why I'm an atheist, right?
Yeah, at my I went to a Christian college, and if you skip church, the horrible Christian joke, which actually isn't terrible, was that you went to Bedside Baptist and heard Pastor Sheets talk. So. Do you have a drum roll thing?
You went to Bedside Baptist,
yeah,
and heard.
Oh,
Pastor
I see.
Talk.
You're like, oh yeah, no, I was at church.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
got it.
Yeah. So anyways, that
Pastor
was
Sheets is a much worse band name.
It could be a good character in a concept album, though.
I agree.
Yeah. on that liberation theology. It could be a track name.
Sure.
Number 4 is such a pain. The Sabbath thing is so arcane. I don't want to disagree. My only day to sleep in late. Don't take his name in vain. From this one you want to abstain. We must set a clear mandate. The best damn way to conjugate. We're almost to the end. If heaven you want to ascend, just take them out one at a time. You shall have no other God but me.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought with that bad joke that I had just called back from 10 years ago. So did your sort of moving from being brought up Presbyterian to now identifying as atheist, did that present any sort of struggle with either your friends or your family or anything like that, or do they you can refuse to answer, that's fine too.
Yeah, no. So definitely a lot of conflict with my dad. The weird thing about my childhood is that my mom was not a churchgoer and not really a believer. And then my dad is super, super Christian. So they're divorced now. Surprise, surprise. But so it hasn't been a problem at all with my mom. But definitely had a lot of conflict with my dad in college when I was rejecting the label for the first time. And now we just don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
We just avoid that topic of conversation. He definitely thinks I'm going to hell, which is, I'm sure, very painful for him. And it's painful for me that he thinks that as well. But we just don't talk about that anymore. In terms of friends, all my church friends, like everyone at church that I was friends with is now no longer a Christian. And I have a couple like Facebook friends from church, but we were never super close. And so we don't have any conflict over it.
Yeah. I think that's a very common occurrence too, where like your youth group friends or whatever are either no longer Christians or stayed like super Christian or super evangelical. And
yeah,
I think that's
especially 'cause, like I was in the worship band, right? So it was like the worship band was like all the weirdos who like listened to a lot of rock music and like painted their nails even though they were boys. It was like all the weirdos were in the worship band. So then now none of us believe in God anymore. We believe in the power of rock and roll.
So why do they even have worship bands anymore? It just seems like a one-way ticket to atheism.
It totally was. Like, it totally was.
One-way ticket to atheism. Another terrible band name.
There are a number of Christian rock stars that are now atheists too.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Pedro the Lion, of course. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's my patron saint basically. Dave Bazan. Anytime he comes anywhere near the Midwest, I see a show. So
that's great.
Yeah. He was too edgy even when he was a Christian to come to my school.
Right.
So so we had to travel, 30 miles to the other Christian college in Indiana.
To the cool Christian college.
What's that?
To the cool Christian college?
Yes, exactly. The
Nico,
Christian college where you could watch rated R movies.
Like whenever there's a Christian music festival, it would be like Pedro the Lion would be like on his own stage, like at a separate time. And then like everybody would go and he would cuss and everyone would be like, oh my God, he said a cuss word.
Yeah,
the thrills.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it's pretty
I wonder
crazy.
How like Scott Stapp is doing these days.
I think he's homeless,
Christian?
actually. There was a story that he's homeless.
Oh, I hope that's not true.
I don't know whether it's true, but there was a story at one point that he was.
Well, he could be technically homeless and still be quite rich.
He could be like Jean-Ralphio, technically homeless.
That's right. Living at the Four Seasons.
All right, so let's talk Bible for a while. What
My
you get?
favorite topic.
Yes.
You two have started a podcast where you have taken upon yourselves to read through the entire Bible.
Book per week.
Yeah,
this is
one
true.
book per week for until the bitter end. And you've actually you've given yourself extra work. You've done.
Yeah, because we're reading the Apocrypha too. Not all of the Apocrypha, but most.
Well, some would say extra, some might not.
Catholics apparently would. Although Catholics don't read the Bible, so who cares?
So what gave you this idea? What made you want to do this show?
Well, a couple of years ago, I decided for some reason to live tweet the Easter story, like from the Bible, like on Easter, and like leading up to Easter, like starting Good Friday actually, because like what you don't realize if you haven't actually read the Gospels is that it's super weird. Like in 3 of the 4 Gospels, the Easter story starts with Jesus telling the disciples to go steal a donkey. And if anyone notices, just say it's for the Lord. And like a lot of like most of the people who follow me on Twitter don't have a strong religious background. And so I was just tweeting all this stuff that, you know, like you might not know if you've never read the Bible, and that's actually super weird and interesting and goofy, really goofy a lot of the time. And then there's like a really good response to that. And so then I started thinking like, I want to do this for the whole Bible, but I knew that if I was just like, I couldn't like, you can't like live tweet the whole, like there's too much. And even doing like a blog about it, I think would be like, who cares what I individually think about the Bible? You know, I'm just like some fucking schmuck. So we'd also been wanting to start a podcast because we both just listen to a lot of podcasts super obsessively, and Nico's a musician, so we have all the recording equipment already. And so then after I had those 2 separate goals in my mind for like a year or 2, I decided, hey, what if we combine those 2 goals?
We were already looking for a project. You know, we were like, we wanted to work together, but we were just looking for the right project.
And yeah, so we decided to do that. It was a little random, but it's been super interesting for me to go through it because obviously being raised Christian and teaching Sunday school, I've read a lot of individual Bible stories and Bible verses, but I've never read through it all the way for the first time. I've never read through it all the way.
For the first time is what we're doing on the show.
Yeah, that's the tagline for the show. That my brain just went into autopilot and and regurgitated. But yeah.
And Nico, what about you? Did you have any exposure to the Torah or anything else from your Jewish background?
No, none at all. I sort of vaguely knew the Hanukkah story. I knew about,
which is not in there.
I knew about the High Holy Days. It's in Maccabees, right?
I guess.
Okay.
But that's
I know it's not in the Torah.
Yeah. Or in the Jewish Bible. It's not in the Tanakh.
So I think that answers your question. No, I think the answer is no.
So yeah, I mean the Old Testament, which is where you are now, and your release schedule is really pretty wacky in a lot of spots.
Yeah,
lots of crazy stuff happens in Genesis.
Genesis alone is like super wacky.
So what's your do you either of you have sort of like favorite crazy doings from early on? I mean, now you're deep into the prophets, which is a lot of doom and gloom for the most part. But there's a lot of
Jonah.
Yeah, Jonah, which is
Jonah's still doom and gloom, but in a very different way.
Yeah. The interesting thing for Jonah is that it ends with it's something along the lines of Nineveh has many people and also cattle. That's how it ends. It's got a lot of cattle. I care for the cattle too, you know.
Look, it's a place.
And in that story, the cattle were also fasting to repent. for their
and the
unholy
sheep were
ways.
wearing sackcloth.
Yeah. So they were showing the proper deference to
Yep.
God. So why shouldn't God care about them?
It's true. They're in sackcloth. So
Do you have any favorite parts, Lauren?
yeah, favorite parts.
I mean, I have really enjoyed all the parts that where you get like a glimpse of just like somebody's personality that's so still exactly the same today.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's I forget, it was somewhere in like Kings or Judges where I forget which king it is. One of these, stupid idol worshipping kings gets a prophet and he's hoping he'll get like a positive prophecy about this upcoming battle. But the prophet is like, no, you're wicked. You need to repent. And he's like, this guy never gives me a good prophecy. He's just always trying to bring me down. And like the idea that a king would say that about a prophet and it would be recorded in a holy book and passed down for thousands of years. And it's just still something that anybody could say today.
It's like, oh, this guy. Oh, this guy again?
Yeah,
Come on.
this guy's just, he has it out for me,
That is true. I love all of those authentic seeming human moments that haven't been like ironed out in the editing and in the canonization and everything like that.
Or like even in the apocryphal book of Tobit, I loved when the main character was like, I should be getting back because my parents are going to start to worry about me. Like I've been traveling a long time and I don't want them to worry.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like such a normal human consideration that's now like enshrined in a holy book.
Yeah, that's interesting. My favorites, I mean, like my all-time favorite is like the wisdom stuff, like Ecclesiastes and Ecclesiasticus.
Oh yeah, Ecclesiasticus is apocryphal.
But
we both loved Ecclesiastes.
Yeah, amazing stuff. But in terms of wackiness, I mean, I guess it also doesn't count because it's apocryphal. But the Book of Enoch is one of the wildest things you'll read. I mean, it's not canonical in outside of Ethiopia, and maybe Eastern Orthodox ?
I don't think Eastern
remember.
Orthodox. Maybe some weird like offshoot of Eastern
Okay.
Orthodox.
But anyway, it's about angels and how evil angels taught man how to, for example,
wear makeup,
and how to count the stars and how to understand the phases of the moon. Yeah.
And these evil angels came down and bred with human women,
and then their children were giants.
Their children were like these evil giants that ate everything, and yeah.
That's amazing stuff.
That was super crazy.
Well, the first third of it. The last 2/3 are, I mean, you could cut those.
It got a little baggy.
Well, some of it does. Some of it does for sure. And much of it has been edited. Some of it pretty well, I think. But
yeah, I think, I mean, I think that the way that, honestly, you both are sort of approaching the Bible more as literature has a lot of value that I think a lot of people could really benefit from. I think it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of interesting the way that the Bible is, when it's portrayed as something that's supposed to be perfect, it makes it homogenous and it makes it less human, because everybody knows that we are not perfect. But then when you accept that this was a book that's been like glued together out of several books over thousands of years,
centuries,
it becomes far more fascinating and far more interesting, and in a way like much more alive than if you just, the Bible says it, I believe it sort of rote response.
It's also like it shows up in so much Western literature.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many biblical allusions that it's really, like if you read Moby Dick, there's an Ishmael and there's an Ahab, and like those both have really deep resonances for you if you know those stories from the Bible. They're still good without it, but knowing the Bible like really
going out on a limb. Moby Dick's still pretty good.
Moby Dick's still pretty good without the Bible. That's my official stance on Moby Dick and on the entire Western canon.
Got it.
But yeah, like Nico, you did not get any of those illusions previously.
No, I hadn't.
And I think that's
and even
true.
if I had read them in a footnote or whatever, I'd be like,
yeah.
What? He's like, Ahab was the king of the northern
right,
kingdom of Israel
he
when
was
it
married
split from
to
Judah,
Jezebel,
and I'm like,
I think that's true of like where we grew up. Most people did not understand those.
I
so
think
like in English class in high school, you know, like I got not all the references, but a lot of them. But I think most people didn't.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I think that's true of a lot of America. I mean, obviously, a lot of America is very, very Christian, but a lot of America is also just very nominally Christian and doesn't actually read the Bible or doesn't identify as Christian at all. And I mean, the Bible is still, I think, a really interesting text for them to read culturally and literarily.
And back to your point earlier about the humanity in the Bible, like even among the prophets, and we're like sort of most of the way through the minor prophets now, I think.
Yeah, we're like halfway through the minor prophets.
Oh man,
we got all the major prophets.
Got it. But like some of them are very cut and dry. Like it's in some cases literally prophecies that are cut and pasted from other parts of the Bible.
Yeah, that's true.
But some of them are very clearly like from a unique point of view, like whether the language is slightly different or whether some of the ideas are slightly different. And it's like in those individual points of view that have actually been preserved now for 2,600 years or something like that. Like and to see how relevant that is to our way of thinking, or to get an idea of this ancient character who is from a holy tradition that persists to this day. That is super interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When it's some of the like stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the I remember I was very religious in high school. Very, very interested in learning about Christianity and all that sort of stuff. And I remember one of my favorite passages was actually in a minor prophet, which was in Habakkuk, which is it's
that's
in Habakkuk.
We haven't read that one yet. That's our next one. That's in two episodes for us.
yeah. So that one has that one, as far as its humanity, it's only like 4 chapters. It's very short, but I mean, it really starts out with this person just like expressing their sorts of doubt and confusion and grief, which, hey, you're a teenager trying to figure out the world. Like, that's kind of where your head is at. And like to have that sort of honesty and that humanity, it is really powerful. And even if you step back and divorce the theistic sort of things from it, there's still a lot of stuff you can identify with just in the sort of human struggle of trying to understand a very confusing world. Which is what can be really, really valuable. And that does have value even as a piece of literature.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely have found like a strange comfort in reading some of these Bible passages and thinking about like, oh, like we're all humans across space and time. Not in thinking like, oh, God is taking care of us, because I don't believe that at all. But it actually has been comforting in a weird, non-theistic way.
Yeah. One thing that I really like about the way you guys do your show is that, Nico, you read from a scholarly version of the Bible, which is the NRSV.
It's the Oxford edition. Yeah,
the Oxford edition, which with scholarly annotations that are more geared towards textual criticism and all of that approach to the Bible. And then Lauren, you are reading the NIV Study Bible, which is like a life application study Bible.
Yes.
So you have a very different sort of lens into both. And as far as those sorts of crazy different views on the text, what has been some of the more diametrically opposed sort of approaches or different notes that the two of you have sort of compared between your two Bibles?
Well, my all-time favorite was a note from Ecclesiastes that was like interpreted. The verse was about like
When you make an investment, like
that was the interpretation of it. The verse was like, I don't know, make sure you like pay attention to lots of things or something. And then the scholarly note was like, this is about investing and how you should invest in like diverse ventures when you're like consolidating your portfolio.
In Ecclesiastes, it was telling you like, don't just do one thing.
Yeah.
Like a varied life is a happy life, essentially.
And then the notes were like,
mutual
diversify
funds.
your portfolio. Yeah. And I was like, yes, this is very Presbyterian. I understand this perspective.
Common stack.
Yeah.
My Bible is very careful about saying, this part was very obviously inserted later, and like making clear some of the distinctions in the text, which is very interesting to just be like, well, in these next 4 chapters, it's a later addition used to like make the earlier prophecy work with the historical reality that followed.
And every time you have those notes, my Bible has notes that are like, some people say this is a later addition, but if you look at this, and this, it makes sense if you like accept that miracles are real and you can do this. And it's like draws like a crazy like conspiracy theory map with like, like yarn thumbtacked to different things. And it's like, so actually it's literally true. How about that?
That sort of wide difference between those two things was one of the things that was very interesting in going to a Christian college, and I initially thought I wanted to be a pastor, and I walked that back. I ended up being a writing major. But I did get a minor in Bib Lit, so I took like a couple years of Greek, and in those courses, like the professors of the Greek would really emphasize the textual history of it and talk about all the different things that went into the manuscripts that became the basis of the Bible we have now. But then I would take other Bible courses, which were much more like the NIV Study Bible, which would be like, let's just kind of gloss over this and have a more devotional understanding of it. Which a devotional understanding, it can be okay, but you can't it's not healthy to deny the history that is actually readily available.
It's funny because I majored in English with an emphasis in creative writing, and I minored in modern languages, and I studied modern Hebrew. You had to have 2 languages to do the minor, so I did Spanish and then Hebrew. And I think that was like a weird holdover from being Christian and like trying to break away from it at the same time that I wasn't quite ready to break away from it, because I was still interested in the Bible and still interested in like a connection to this tradition, but I also just kind of wanted to like approach it from a linguistic standpoint instead of a spiritual standpoint or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is something to learning one of those languages. For me, it actually created a major crisis of faith for me in college. Because even though I went to United Methodist and they're not big on the inerrancies thing, which believing the whole Bible is perfect without any error.
Presbyterians aren't into that either.
Yeah. And the denomination wasn't, but my I don't know whether this was something I learned from my parents or something like that, because they came from a more conservative background personally. But learning about the actual textual history became very problematic. Just because that's one of the pillars of your faith, kind of. But at the same time, like now in the position I am in now, it's more enriching than anything to know that sort of not to think that it was an active deception that was that was put on me. It's more the deception was really the thought that the Bible was inerrant. And that's actually the
Right.
deception, not
Right.
necessarily the Bible itself. It didn't really the monks that copied it for 1,500 years. They didn't really do anything wrong. They were doing their best.
Don't those poor monks have caught enough shit recently.
Yeah, seriously,
Can we just back off?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let the monks live. Leave the monks alone.
So, sorry. I'll have to edit out this transition here. Lauren, you're also working with one of my prior guests, Dr. Chris Stroop, on an anthology.
Dr. Chris?
Yes, Dr. Chris Stroop.
Your anthology, I believe, is called By the Rivers of Babylon, which is
yes,
which is a biblical reference, and it's about people who have stepped away from Christianity, stepped away from the faith of their childhood or their heritage.
Yeah. So the Bible verse is the Bible verse is like, by the rivers of Babylon we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion, and it's about Israelites being literally like taken over by another country, the nation of Babylon, and being exiled to Babylon. So it's about like a literal political exile, but obviously it's been used metaphorically for many different situations. And so in our case, the anthology is personal essays by people who grew up Christian but have left the church, and it's kind of about being exiles from Christianity and the good and bad parts of that, and what we reject and what we still cherish and what we miss and what we are glad to be free of, and from lots of different angles, lots of
different. What sort of have you noticed any sort of like linguistic sort of themes that are happening? And the reason I mention that is because a lot of people that I've been talking to as part of this project, either on the show or on Twitter or somewhere else, a lot of times like fall back to this sort of language of getting out, which is like basically like prison language in a way, like escaping captivity.
Yeah, I mean, I do conceptualize it that way. I definitely feel like I have freedom. I feel like free now. And I didn't realize that I didn't feel free before, but once I was gone from it, then oh God, this is what real freedom feels like. I don't know if I would say there's linguistic trends, but definitely thematic trends. Like we definitely have like a lot of contributors who like left the church because they were queer in some way, or left the church because it was like oppressive to women. And then there's also some miscellaneous ones in there that are like, I thought about it, realized didn't make a lot of sense. Or people who experienced abuse. Yeah,
and those are all valid and understandable reasons to leave. And this, part of doing the show, the thing I find so interesting is that some people are better, like feel free or better when they just leave, and then others have found a way to sort of redefine what they believe and stay within the bounds. And I'm more in that camp personally than
like full atheists. Yeah.
But that, I mean, to your point earlier, I'm not. I think the thing that a lot of people tend to reject is fundamentalism, whether it's atheistic or Christian or some other
taking the
form
fun out of fundamental.
What's that?
Taking the fun out of fundamental, putting the mental in fundamentalism.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. A bunch of our contributors do still identify as either like they believe in God, or even some of them still identify as some sort of Christian-ish type thing. I would say actually of the contributors we have so far, a majority are not atheists. Which was surprising to me because that was my path and I assumed it would be more common, especially coming from the Bay Area where like atheism is kind of the default, or at least agnosticism.
Yeah. And is that sort of region the area where a lot of your contributors are from or live now?
There are several from here because those are like people that I know, you know. But I think of the contributors we have from the Bay Area, aside from me, I don't think any are from the Bay Area originally. Like one is from Massachusetts. So he was raised like Catholic, like, you know, like Boston Catholic style. Another is from Colombia, the country,
Not the district,
and raised was raised Catholic in Colombia, then moved to Miami as a teenager and was raised like evangelical there. So yeah, I think that we do have several Bay Area contributors, but none are like originally from the Bay Area.
You were talking about your own preconceptions about how it would shake out based on being from the Bay Area.
Yeah.
That to me, the sort of commonality of a lot of people that have like this sort of evangelical background, it's almost like, I don't know, it's like McDonald's. It's kind of the same everywhere. And that is also very interesting just in the homogenous aspect of a lot of American culture. It extends into religion, which I didn't expect and didn't realize until much later in life.
Yeah. In terms, like, I feel like actually there's like a really actually strong connection between like evangelicalism and like McDonald's. Like I feel those are like comparable in a lot of ways. Where it's like not actually religion the way that McDonald's isn't actually like food, you know, like it's religion on a technicality. But mainly it's just about like being a homogenous culture.
And I'm going to make a hard pivot.
Please do.
Now, to just kind of where we are culturally in this situation.
In this terrible world we live in now.
Yes.
This quote unquote situation.
In this, this situation. Not from Jersey Shore, just an awful situation.
He's probably Catholic, right?
Didn't speculate.
We're recording this the first day of December, so we're a few weeks.
2016.
Yeah, we're a few weeks removed from the events of November 8th,
which shall not be named.
And what's your overall bead on the overall culture? Also, specifically, the contributions of evangelicals and other conservative Christians to this sort of situation that we're in now.
Overall, it's not looking good. Outlook bad.
I mean, it's weird because Donald Trump is not just the least Christ-like of any president ever, but also the least Christian. But he got like 80% of the evangelical vote, despite the fact that he clearly has never read the Bible. He called it 2 Corinthians instead of 2 Corinthians. And like when he was asked to name his favorite Bible verse, he said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, which like he was just lucky that actually is from the Bible. He didn't know that, you know. And it's clearly the message that Jesus like explicitly repudiated. So you would think that like evangelicals would not be into that.
Well, he's an Old Testament president. That's what we're getting at.
Exactly.
Yeah. He's into the classics.
But the weird thing that I've noticed that has not been like really discussed in the mainstream discourse is abortion, which I saw so many Christians on Facebook saying like, well, I really don't like Donald Trump, and he doesn't reflect my values, but he promised to overturn Roe versus Wade, so I have to vote for him. And I actually have one side of my family is from Brazil, and so I have actually a lot of Latino immigrant family members who you would think would not vote for Trump since he wants to deport them all. But they did vote for him because of abortion, because they're very strongly evangelical. So what I want to do is figure out a way to completely change Christian culture, to completely destigmatize abortion in the next 2 years, and then I think we'll be fine. That seems realistic, right? Midterm elections are going to hit. It's going to be all Democrat. Free abortions for everyone, miniature American flags for everyone else, and
don't blame me. I voted for Kodos.
Then we're good to go.
Nico, what's your take on it as someone that doesn't necessarily have this background but is an observer? And what's your take on it?
Oh, I'm just I'm scared and concerned. I don't have a super hot take besides being worried about the culture wars coming back. And
well, they never left.
I know they were just below the surface.
Yeah.
For me in my bubble. And so, we get to see it all play out again. People's individual rights, being decided by, I don't know. I don't have anything brilliant to say about it, but I am just,
sure am scared.
Scared and concerned, So it's in these times of trouble, just got to produce entertainment. And
at least you have the Bible to
turn out that quality content.
That's right.
And at least you have the Bible to turn to in these tough times.
That's right. It's always there for me.
Actually, I have found it has been so strange that I've been so comforted by reading the Bible because it takes my mind off of current events. So like it's not like I'm getting comfort through feeling like, oh, God's still there and he's going to take care of all this. But I'm like, oh, I just can think about Jonah for a while. He got swallowed by a whale. It only lasted 3 days, and then his problem was done. Mm-hmm. Isn't that great? I wish I was in his place.
Oh, but one day the whale will shoot us out of its blowhole onto the beach. Just...
Metaphorically speaking.
Yes. We'll leave.
One day emerge
from the belly of the whale, right? Make it on the beach like a birth
Donald
in
Trump's
reverse.
presidency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining me today. Where can everybody find your show and anywhere else you might be online?
Yeah, so our show is Sunday School Dropouts. You can find it on iTunes or on pretty much like any other podcast platform.
Mm-hmm.
We're on Twitter at Sunday School Drop. And I'm on Twitter personally as Lauren E. O'Neill. O'Neill spelled Oneal, like Shaquille spells it.
And I'm not on Twitter.
Nico's not on Twitter, but we are starting a bullying campaign to get him on Twitter. So if our podcast gets 100 iTunes reviews, we will force him unwillingly onto Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Force me to enjoy my media.
Yeah. So that, and then we're on like Facebook if you search for Sunday School Dropouts, whatever. And I think that's all our shit.
Eloquent as always.
Great. Well, thank you both for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.